There we go. Just sent out the link. Looks like it's really blurry. Let me lens maybe. Sorry guys. Here, let me just shut the windows behind me. Maybe that'll help. Okay, give me just a sec. Oops. Let's see. Is that a little better? Yeah, sorry, that's weird. I don't know why it's doing that weird glare thing. Anyway, sorry about that. That should work. Anyway, it looks like we got some people joining us. I'll give it just a minute before I start on some class business. And I'm getting a text, not from any of you. Okay. So keep in mind, so today we're going to do a review for the final exam. Sorry, I'm just kind of getting all these settings cleaned up. Hey, Archer, can you keep it down, buddy? Sorry. And then, anyway, so we're going to do a final exam review today. Also, by the end of today, I'm through some of you, but not all of them, in trying to get everybody's grades to a point where you know where you stand without the final, including some of the grade adjustments for having to switch to online, things like that. So don't fret about grades just yet. Give me till the end of the day today. I'll send out a Canvas message when everybody's done. And that way, if you're still worried, you can reach out, see if we maybe missed something. I had a number of you email me if we were, if you missed a portal online or anything like that. So anyway, we'll take care of that stuff. Also, and I'll send this out through Canvas. It's also available on the school's website. But the final is next Tuesday at 9 a.m. I think 9 to 11. So what we'll do is I will just run it like a regular Top Hat test. I'll have the code sent to you all through Canvas, and then I'll give you all ample time. If anybody cannot start right at 9, let me know. So anyway, I'll send all those details out pretty soon, but we have till next Tuesday to get that taken care of. Okay, so let's get started with our final exam review. Feel free to comment in the chat, or sorry, my allergies are still crazy. Anyway, feel free to comment in the chat or text me if you have any questions. But what we're going to do today is go through the document I posted. It's on Module 3 at the very bottom of Module 3. It says Business Law Accounting 3350 Fall 2019 mailing. That's just the title of the document. And that was last semester's final. All of my finals are different, but we use very, very similarly styled questions, if that makes sense. Okay. So, and I wish, let's see, is there a way to screen share on here? Are any of you guys techies? Do you know how to screen share on YouTube? I'm not sure I can do that here. I'm kind of looking for. Darn it. Okay. Anyway, so if you can, and excuse me, I need to blow my nose. Yeah, I'm not seeing a way to easily screen share. There's probably an app or plugin I could use. But anyway, if you could follow along on that, whether now or later on this um, final from last year. So this question one, we are going to have a question similar to this, right? So Michael Scott is going to Europe on vacation and wants Dwight Schrute to execute a real estate transaction on his behalf during his absence. What kind of agency is appropriate for this transaction? General agency, special agency, secret agency, and travel agency. Okay. So you all should know secret agency and travel agency are not going to be good answer choices. So your options are between general and special. Keep in mind, a general agency is unlimited in scope. Basically, this person is replacing the principal, or rather representing them in every possible capacity that is financial. Okay. Whereas a special agency is limited in some way. And we almost never want to do an agency unless it's limited in some way. Okay. So, real estate transaction, we want a special agency to Dwight Schrute. Okay. um, uh, Number two, Pam falls while performing her job duties and severs her finger on a piece of paper. What kind of claim is appropriate for this kind of injury? Small claims, district court, federal court, or workers' compensation? Okay, so we haven't covered a lot of the other types of court. But we will have a question about workers' compensation. So the key takeaway here is if it's an injury within the scope of job duties, it's going to be a workers' compensation claim. Um, and that, and I, anyway, today you will also receive a study guide that kind of has some of these highlights. So that should help you quite a bit as well. Okay. Um, so the next, I believe it was 3 questions. Yeah, 3 questions on this exam, and we might have something similar. But the next 3, I'll deal with authority of agents. Okay. So number 3, T. Swizzy is an up and coming music artist. A fan, unbeknownst to Miss Swizzy, arranges a record deal on her behalf. What principle best applies if T. Swizzy acquiesces? Um, so in this case, did we ever have agency? Was there ever an agreement to have agency? No. Okay. So in that case, really none of these authorities even apply. But the fact that T. Swizzy acquiesces after the fact and ratifies that deal. Okay. So we have ratification there. In the next one, number 4, in another deal, Miss Swizzy's appointed general agent arranges the transaction, even though the power to make such transactions is not explicitly stated in their agency agreement. What principle applies in this case? So keep in mind, Miss Swizzy's appointed general agent. So she does have an agent. It's a general agent. We didn't grant that power explicitly, but what principle is used anyway? So we have our choices are express, implied, apparent, express, applied, or apparent. Express authority, implied authority, apparent authority, or ratification. And keep in mind in this case, because it's a general agency, even though it's not expressly stated, it is implied based on her position. Okay, so where we have a general agent, that general agent is implied. It has implied power to make these types of arrangements. Okay. So in this one, it would be implied authority. Okay. We didn't expressly agree to it. Apparent authority only deals with third party reasonable beliefs. There was actual authority, so we're not dealing with ratification. So implied, it's implied by her position. Okay. Number 5, later, Miss Swizzy fires her agent. However, she fired her in the middle of a contract negotiation. Miss Swizzy never notified the other party of the firing. Which principle may bind Miss Swizzy to her former agent's actions? Now, keep in mind, when you fire someone or let someone go, your first duty is to let your existing clients know, because otherwise you risk having an apparent authority situation where they've already dealt with this agent. They're comfortable with this employee, with this agent, dealing with them. They understand that they represent you. and they have no way of knowing that that's no longer the case unless you let them know. Okay, so we're going to go with apparent authority in this case. 6, an evil corporation directs its employees to forge documents to feign compliance, or rather um, to appear like they're complying. Right? Who is liable for the forgery? Is this going to be a direct company liability? Is this a vicarious company liability? Where is this going to be a situation where the company is not liable at all, but the employees are personally liable for their actions, or is there really no liability with any party? And here we're looking at the agency that employees have in these types of situations. Okay, um, where the corporation is directing its employees to forge or to do anything else illegal or inappropriate, the company is directly liable. This is the same as kind of that hitman principle. Okay, so if you tell someone else to do a bad action and they do it, you are still directly liable. Okay, um, so in this case, it's direct company liability. With in number 7, though, without the company's encouragement, the company's employees undertake unethical and illegal business practices. Company management knows of the culture but does nothing to correct it. Who is liable for illegal practices? Once again, this is going to be a direct company liability because even though the company didn't direct this kind of behavior, they are still directly liable because they knew about it and didn't do anything to correct it. Now, in variations of this question, vicarious company liability would only come in if it's kind of like a normal, really scope of duties. So if they're acting within the confines of the law, or at least trying to, and taking reasonable measures to do so, but something happens regardless, and it's within the scope of employment, there's vicarious liability to the company. Okay. Um, Employees are personally liable and the company receives no liability only in situations where the employee is taking actions far beyond the scope of their employment. It wasn't predictable. The company didn't really have a chance to mitigate it. The company didn't know, that kind of stuff. Okay. So anyway, we'll keep an eye out for those types of uh, questions. Numbers 8 and 9, I believe we had in one of our earlier quizzes, but we're going to review again anyway. So number 8, 2 college roommates own their respective businesses. Glinda owns a restaurant and the real estate thereof. Elphaba struggles in her catering business, and Glinda lets her use her building for free. The community as a whole believes that the restaurant and catering business are one and the same. Elphaba applies for a loan, and the lender gives it to her, um, citing that she knows her partner is good for it. What kind of partnership do they have? Um, and the choices are express, implied, partnerships, partnership by estoppel, or no partnership. When we have this quiz, many of you argue that there's no partnership because Glinda never consented to it and never really was aware of that understanding. But in the question where we say that the community as a whole believes that they're one and the same, we're gonna really, what we're trying to test for here is partnership by estoppel. The one downside of administering a new exam every semester is sometimes the questions I ask just aren't perfect. They have flaws. But this one, what we were really looking for is partnership by estoppel. Okay, so both parties knew or should have known that lenders had a reasonable belief that they were in partnership together in some way. They never rebutted that reasonable belief, so we're looking for partnership by estoppel. Although there is a valid argument that there was no partnership here. Okay, in the variation that we'll get, maybe we'll see some other facts that make it a little more clear in your version of the final. Okay. And let's see. Oh, that's not you guys either. So number 9, in a parallel universe, the 2 roommates decide to start catering weddings. and joining their business efforts toward this project. They execute a contract wherein they agree to split costs and profits of the project. What kind of partnership do they have? Is it express partnership, implied partnership, partnership by estoppel, or no partnership? In this case, what we're looking at is actually a partnership, um, an implied partnership. Now, you could argue that they agree to split costs and profits. They're working together. That's an express partnership. But keep in mind, these are two separate businesses, and they're just joining efforts for catering weddings. So they're joining the separate efforts of their businesses for um, for the purpose of um, they're catering weddings for the purpose of joining their business efforts in kind of this limited scope. Okay. So normally this would be more appropriate for like a joint venture agreement or something like that, but where they have a contract splitting costs and profits without any other information, what they have really done is created an implied partnership. Okay. So that's an implied partnership. Um, and then what kind of law originates in the courts? This is the common law. Okay, so keep in mind civil law is through the through the legislatures. Common law is through the courts. Okay, I do want you to remember that. We'll probably have a question along those lines. Okay. Um, let's see. Um, okay, here we go. Yep. So um, the next couple questions are whether a contract is an express contract, an implied contract, a quasi contract, or no contract. Okay. So 11, Pam offers her painting for sale to Jim. Jim agrees to her terms and offers payment upon delivery. What kind of contract do they have? Um, is this express, implied, quasi, or no contract? Okay. Where they've expressly agreed to terms, this is an express contract. Okay. This should be pretty simple. Number 12, though, from the situation in the previous question, delivery is to Dwight's desk instead of Jim's. Oh, thank you. It's breakfast, guys. This is why we love our chickens. These are Snowball's eggs, if you remember Snowball from our introductions. It's been really cold in the mornings lately, so I haven't been out there as much. Sorry, I have to eat before I take allergy medicine, so I'm just going to snack a little bit while we're going over stuff. So the delivery is to Dwight's desk instead of Jim's. Dwight accepts delivery and takes the painting home. What kind of contract does Dwight have with Pam, if any? In this case, this is a quasi contract. Okay, so quasi contract is where it's almost always a case of mistaken delivery. So you don't have any reason to think that these goods show up. Margaret, you're being too loud. You're being too loud. Sorry. Life with young children is really fun. So I promise she's crying, but she's not dying. She's just mad about her breakfast. Anyway, so this is a quasi contract because you don't have any reasonable expectation of goods just showing up for whatever reason without some kind of payment. So Dwight has a contract now, quasi contract, where he needs to pay Pam for that painting. Okay. The next couple, 13 and 14, deal with unilateral and bilateral contracts. Okay, so keep in mind, a unilateral contract is a contract that is accepted with an action. Okay, so what it comes down to is the method of acceptance. If the acceptance is an action, then it's a unilateral contract. If the acceptance is a promise to make a future action, it's a bilateral contract. So in both cases, we have a valid offer. The bilateral contract, the offer can be accepted with a promise. In a unilateral contract, we need not. It's basically an open offer unless it's rescinded or the action is completed. Okay, so in this case, Pam offers her painting for sale to the first person to take it from her desk. What kind of contract is this if it's accepted? In this case, this is a unilateral contract. Okay, so it's for sale to the first person to take it from her desk. Okay, so the other answer choice is trilateral contract. That's not a thing, at least not for this class, right? But the acceptance is to take an action. Therefore, this is a unilateral contract. On number 14, however, Jim calls Pam with a counteroffer to the previous question's offer. Um, so he'll take the painting tomorrow if she reserves it for him. She acquiesces, meaning she agrees. What kind of contract do they have now? This is now a bilateral contract. Okay, so from an offer standpoint, remember the paper airplane in class. So if we have an offer that Pam has thrown out there that can only be accepted by an action, Jim has effectively rejected that offer and proposed his own counteroffer, which is a new offer entirely. And his is a bilateral contract, basically saying he promises to take the painting tomorrow if she promises to reserve it for him. Okay, so in this case, we have a bilateral contract. Okay, take a look at this. I have another bite. This is really good, guys. Nothing like farm fresh eggs. If any of you are still in town and need farm fresh eggs, we've got plenty. Um, Okay, number 15. A handyman is only licensed for projects up to $5,000 in value. Okay. And this is actually roughly true one. Handyman, if you're licensed in Utah, there is a cap. I can't remember what the cap is, but basically you can only make improvements up to a certain dollar amount. After that, you have to have a general contractor license. So anyway, handyman is only licensed for projects up to a certain amount of value. Pam hires Roy, the handyman, for a $25,000 project. What kind of contract do they have? Now, is this voidable, unenforceable, or is it valid? In this case, we're looking for void. Okay, so keep in mind if a contract violates any kind of regulatory law, there's a good chance it's going to be void. Okay, meaning it's illegal. The courts are simply not going to hold it up or recognize it as a valid contract. Okay. 16. Dwight buys beans from Jim. Jim finances the purchase and allows Dwight to make payments over time. Dwight stops making payments and Jim fails to collect. 8 years later, Jim wants to collect. The statute of limitations on a debt is 6 years. What kind of contract do Dwight and Jim have? So we had a valid contract at one point. However, we have not collected on the contract was breached, payment was not made, and we haven't collected in 8 years. And the statute of limitations in that state says after 6 years, it's not enforceable anymore. Okay, so this is an unenforceable contract. Okay, so it was valid at one point, no longer the case. Okay. Now, oh, I did want to make one other point though, because one of the question variants may have what this kind of an option. Okay, so where does voidable come in? Okay, so if we have a voidable contract, that means that usually one party was at some kind of disadvantage, whether they were a minor at the time of the contract, or they were incapacitated, or under duress, or had bad information, like a misrepresentation. That may make it voidable at their option, meaning it's a valid contract, it's totally enforceable, but the party that was under duress or incapacitated or at some kind of disadvantage has a certain length of time before they can exercise an option to void the contract, making it an illegal contract. Now, the other party's bound to that decision, but the party that was at the disadvantage has an option to make the contract void instead of valid. Okay. Um, we so at this particular iteration, none of those applied. In yours, maybe that will change. Okay. Number 17. T Swizzy assigns her Spotify royalties to the Jakartan Sanctuary for Felines. Keep in mind, so Jakarta is in Indonesia. Okay, felines is another word for cats. Okay, um, so which of the following would be Spotify's best argument for voiding this assignment? Okay, so once again, so T Swizzy assigns her Spotify royalties. So she has an agreement with Spotify. She assigns them to this Jakartan Sanctuary for Felines. Now, do we have a right to assign royalties or assign a benefit of a contract? Yes. But let's look at our answer choices and see what would be Spotify's best argument for voiding the assignment if they want to say, no, you can't make that assignment. Okay. Um, Spotify encounters significant regulatory burdens in transferring funds overseas. Okay, so Spotify wants to void it because they have they're going to have a significant burden in making that assignment. Okay, that let's keep looking. B, cats are not people. Um, Even if cats are not people, we don't want to provide for cats. Is that going to be Spotify's best argument in voiding this transfer? Probably not. Okay. C, T Swizzy made an assignment outside of her best interest. So T Swizzy is no longer going to benefit from this. Instead, this sanctuary will. Is that going to be a good argument for Spotify? Probably not. Okay. Because even if Spotify, um, uh, uh, i- if Spotify's burden is not increased, it doesn't matter whether or not T Swizzy's assignment is outside of her interest. Okay, um, they we want to give T Swizzy autonomy to make the assignment in whatever way she wants. Okay, so the answer in this case would be A. Spotify encounters significant regulatory burdens in transferring funds overseas. So we can assign benefits of contracts to whoever we want. We have the freedom to do that. Um, but the person who has to fulfill that assignment, as long as we're going to honor that choice, as long as the person fulfilling the assignment doesn't incur any additional costs or burdens that they didn't initially sign up for in the contract. Um, let's see. Okay, so now we're going to talk about damages. So remember when we were talking about breaches of contract, things like that. What can you sue for? Okay, that text isn't you guys either. You guys are being really quiet today. So there's only 18 of you, so we've only got half the class, but that's okay. I hope most of you watch later. Um, 18, T Swizzy's concert gets canceled at the last minute to accommodate a schedule for Jay Beebs. T Swizzy loses $60,000 in profits due to the switch. What kinds of damages should she sue for? Okay, so keep in mind when we're looking at lost profit, um, that's where we're dealing with compensatory damages. Now, sometimes those profits are hard to calculate, which is why we might look at something like liquidated damages instead, where the parties agreed beforehand in the contract if there's a breach. This is the predetermined cost of the breach. And so you've got to pay the party this predetermined amount, right? That would be liquidated. Um, and let's kind of look at the others to see if those make sense. Incidental happens when the non-breaching party incurs costs in trying to mitigate the costs of their breach. Okay, so do we have any discussion here about T Swizzy trying to mitigate her damages? No, so that's not going to apply in this question, right? Consequential, what are some natural consequences of the breach? We could argue that the lost 60K in profits is a consequential, but compensatory specifically deals with lost profits. Okay. And then finally, nominal. Is this something where she wants to sue for $1 just as a symbolic gesture from the courts that yes, the other party was in the wrong? No. Okay. So in this case, compensatory makes the most sense. Let's go to 19. Okay. So when T Swizzy's concert gets canceled, she's able to recoup her lost profits by performing at a nearby dive bar. So she made up her 60K in lost profits by performing at this dive bar. Her increased travel expenses were $23.71 to make it to this bar and back, presumably. Okay. What kind of damages should she sue for? In this case, T Swizzy was not a breaching party. Okay. But she took steps to mitigate her damages so that instead of incurring $60,000 in lost profits, she's able to recoup those. But she did have there were some consequences there. She had to spend an extra 23.71 to make that up. So we got a text question. What does incidental damage mean again? Okay, so in this case, in 19, incidental damages are the damages that T Swizzy is incurring because she's trying to reduce her uh, the losses. Okay, so she was the non-breaching party. She's not the one that canceled her contract or her concert. Okay, um, and she was going to be out 60 grand, but she took initiative to reduce her damages. We want people to have incentives to reduce their losses. Okay, but because of that extra effort she took to mitigate her damages, as a non-breaching party, as someone who it wasn't her fault, but she still went out of her way to reduce her or mitigate her damages. Um, Her increased travel expenses were $23.71. So her incidental damages in this case are $23.71. So she recouped all her lost profits, but she incurred extra travel costs. So she should sue for incidental damages to recoup those extra travel costs that she incurred in as part of mitigating her her damage her I don't want to say damages because we're talking about damages to mitigate her losses. Okay. And I hope that answered the question. Um, Number 20, one of T Swizzy's dancers cops a feel in violation of his contract. Um, if you remember when I think we talked about this in class. There was a news story about a pop singer, similar name to this example, right? And during a photo op, somebody copped a feel. And then, like in real life, in this hypothetical, T Swizzy sues for $1 to have the court tell him he was wrong. Okay. What kind of damage did she sue for here? And in this case, this is nominal damages. Okay. So we're not claiming any lost profits here. We're not claiming that there was some kind of breach of contract that she had to go out and mitigate or reduce her losses for. We're not claiming that there was any kind of natural consequential damage resulting from the breach. Um, the consequential might come up if um, like I think a couple semesters ago, I used an example. Beets were supposed to be picked. They weren't. They left rotting in the field. The natural consequential damage of that is that those beets rotted, and it caused other issues with pests and things like that. Okay, those would be consequential damages, so foreseeable consequences to their actions. Hey, buddy. That should be peaceful. Okay. Can you go back to the kitchen, buddy? Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we have a potty training toddler that runs around in his underwear this week, so trying to keep him off camera, but he wants to come and see what Dad's up to. Um, let's see. So yeah. So in number 20, we have so this dancer cops a feel. She's suing for $1 as a symbolic wrong. Basically, we want to air this issue in public and have the court say he was wrong, but we don't want to, we're not worried about calculating actual damages. We just want a symbolic gesture. So these are nominal damages. Basically, damages in name only, $1, $10, $100, something small in the relative scheme of things. Now, in the real life scenario, you can look it up. It was actually a countersuit. So the man actually sued because he lost his job. Then the pop star countersued. I'm getting a call. I don't know if it's from one of you. It's a number I don't recognize. So sorry, but I'll only respond to texts or chat things during the thing. So if you have a question, if you could text it or send it in the chat, that'd be great. Okay, so number 21. Dwight wants to irrigate beets on his 40-acre beet farm in Utah. Okay, so keep in mind this is Utah law because every state is different. How many acre feet of water rights does he need to irrigate his farm? Keep in mind one of the two principles I wanted you to take away from water rights was the duty. So how many acre feet of water do you require to irrigate a certain amount of acreage? And you need to be able to do that calculation. I hope this calculation is easy. So keep in mind, so this is a 40-acre beet farm. How many acre feet per acre do we need is 4. Okay, so we need 4 acre feet of water rights per acre of land. So we have a 40-acre beet farm. We need 160 acre feet to irrigate that. Okay. We may have a variation of that, where a farmer has, say, 40 acre feet of water rights. How much land can the farmer irrigate with those water rights? So 40 acre feet means there's enough water to irrigate 10 acres. Okay. So that's an important principle I want you to take away. Statistically, probably at least 20% of you will end up working in real estate in some fashion. So that's an important thing you need to take away because most real estate professionals are woefully undereducated in water rights. So in this state, that's a really important skill that you need to learn. Number 22. This is the other takeaway I wanted you to have from when it comes to water rights is what happens in times of scarcity. Okay, and this principle applies in any jurisdiction that's under this Western or prior appropriation doctrine. So pretty much everything west of the Mississippi uses this kind of logic or formula in calculating for times of shortage. So in the Cedar Area Basin, the state engineer's office has determined that the safe yield of this basin is 21,000 acre feet, and that's per year, right? And as review, safe yield means that's how much our aquifer recharges every year, so we can easily pull that out without any problem. Okay. Now, granted, usage in this case exceeds 21,000 acre feet. So the state engineer's office implements a groundwater management plan whose rights of the 5 users in the valley will be the oldest rights that can no longer be exercised. Okay, so we're using a very simplified scenario where there are only 5 users in the entire valley. And so those users are A, B, C, D, and E with different priority dates and different amounts of water rights. Okay, so of these 5 users, who has the oldest rights that can no longer be exercised? So keep in mind with groundwater management plans, what we're doing is if we say 21,000 acre feet is the safe yield, we're going to start with the oldest and start adding the younger rights until we're at our usage cap, and then everybody after that can no longer exercise. So A, B, C, D, and E are years 1932, 33, 34, 35, 36. So these are in order of priority. Okay, oldest to youngest, and their amounts vary. So the oldest one is 1932 at 4,000 acre feet. Is that lower than 21,000? Yes. Okay. So they can still use their water. B is 15,000 acre feet. If we add that to the 14, we're at 19,000 acre feet. Is that still less than the 21,000? Yes. So both A and B can use all of their water rights. Okay. C has 2,000 acre feet. If we add A, B, and C together, we're at 21,000 acre feet. Can they continue to use their rights? Yes, but now we're at our cap. Okay, 21,000 acre feet is the cap. So then D has 9,000 acre feet. Can they use any of that water? No. E is 10,000 acre feet. Can they use any of that water? No. Okay. So the oldest rights that can no longer be exercised would be D, because that's the oldest water right holder that can no longer use theirs due to this groundwater management plan. So the answer would be D. Okay, so keep in mind with this issue, what we're going to do is calculate who can still use their water in times of shortage. Okay, and we'll have a similar type of fact pattern for that. Okay, who can still use their water or whose water is cut off. So pay attention to the phrasing of the question. 23. Dwight's property is located in the middle of a national park. Which of the following does he need to build a road through the park for access? Sorry, I phrased that weird. Anyway, which of the following does he need to build a road through the park for access to his property? There we go. Does he need a nuisance? Does he need an easement? Does he need a variance? Or does he need eminent domain? Okay, so keep in mind, Dwight's property is located in the middle of a national park. What does he need to build a road through the park so that he can access his property? What is a nuisance? Okay, so we're going to test on what is a nuisance. Nuisance is a use of property that's interfering with the rightful enjoyment of others to use their property. Is that the case here? No, he just wants access to his park. Okay, what about an easement? So an easement is use or access to another's property for whatever reason. Maybe it's to access their own, maybe it's for public utilities, something like that. So does he need use or access of another's property? Yes. Okay. So in this case, yes, it's an easement. In case we're testing on it though, so variance, does he need a variance through the park? No. Variance only governs your own property and the use thereof. So if it was zoned for a particular use or designated a particular use and he needed to vary from that or to deviate from that somehow to use it as he intended without creating a nuisance to neighbors, then he'd apply for a variance. Okay. And eminent domain is a public taking of property for a public purpose. Okay. And so long as they provide just compensation. So let's say the national park wanted to take Dwight's property because it's in the middle of it and it's a great site for, I don't know, geyser viewing or something like that. As long as the government can say there is a justifiable, reasonable public purpose for this, and we're willing to provide Dwight fair compensation, we can take his property. Okay. Now, some states have restricted or are continuing to restrict some of those uses for eminent domain. But in general, as a concept, the government can take property for public or private use as long as they provide just compensation for that property. Okay. 24. Which of the following is most likely a nuisance? Okay, so what is something that is going to interfere with the quiet, reasonable enjoyment of others based on someone else's land use? Okay, so a food garden in one's own front yard in a residential area. Now, some cities do ban growing vegetables in a front lawn, but what we're looking at is a nuisance. Okay, so is a food garden in a front lawn in a residential area a nuisance? Not at the common law. It's not affecting the other people's enjoyment of their property. Okay, um, we got a another question. Please remind what a nuisance means again. Yep. So once again, a nuisance is an action on one's own property generally that interferes with a reasonable, expected, quiet enjoyment of others' property. So if it's something that's going to bother neighbors, um, and it's not something that's expected or reasonably expected in that area, it's probably it could be a nuisance. Okay, so food garden in a front yard, it's not going to be a nuisance. Okay, does it affect, are there noises or smells or distasteful views from that garden? Generally, no. Okay, let's look at B. A stray dog in a neighbor's backyard killing their chickens. Is that a nuisance? Yeah, that's probably a nuisance, right? Because we have a stray dog. So let's say I own the dog, it strays, and it goes to my neighbor's backyard, killing their chickens. Is that something that is interfering with my neighbor's reasonable expectation of enjoying their property? Yes. Okay. They have a right to not have animals or humans straying into their backyard, killing their chickens. Okay. So that's a nuisance. Um, See, tractor tilling in an agricultural area. Now, tilling soil, where we're stirring up soil, that's a loud and sometimes dusty activity. And maybe there's smells associated, especially if you're spreading manure. But then what we're coming back to is the expectations, the reasonable expectations. Is if this is an agricultural area, there's no expectation. Or rather, there is an expectation that tractor tilling is a normal activity in that kind of area. Okay, so tractor tilling in an agricultural area, not a nuisance. Tractor tilling in a residential area, that might be a nuisance, especially if it's all the time or at night or right next to houses blowing dust into them, things like that. Okay. D, heavy manufacturing in an industrial zone. So if we have an industrial zone is designated for industrial uses, very loud, very smelly, very dusty. So heavy manufacturing in an industrial zone, is that a nuisance? Probably not. Okay. So heavy, like loud manufacturing, maybe there's some smells, maybe some minor pollution, but if in an industrial zone, that is expected. So at least from a nuisance standpoint, that's not a nuisance. Okay, heavy manufacturing in a residence. Um, Once again, that's probably not expected, and it's interfering with neighbors' ability to the quiet enjoyment of their property. Okay. Um, Okay, so 25. A city wants to take a neighborhood to sell to a developer to build a shopping mall. What must the city provide the homeowners? So once again, so we have a city, the municipality wants to take a neighborhood. They want to exercise eminent domain over it and take it. Okay, and then they're going to turn around and sell it to this developer, so the developer can build a shopping mall. In most states, that is a valid use of eminent domain, so long as the city provides the homeowners something. Okay, do they need a fair hearing? I mean, probably, but that's not what we're looking for. Okay, we need more than just a fair hearing to take people's property. Equal protection, maybe, but what we're looking for is C, is just compensation, or in other words, fair compensation. Okay, so the key with eminent domain is that the government can take your property, even if they're going to turn around and sell it to a private developer, but they need to provide you fair compensation. Okay. Uh, there's a lot of political debate on whether that's a good public policy, but what we're just looking at is legal definitions here. Okay. Um, and then D, free lunch. That's just kind of a joke one. Okay. 26. A grocer wants to open a satellite bodega to sell groceries in an underserved residential neighborhood. What does the grocer need to obtain? Okay. So once again, so we have a grocer, so someone who sells groceries, sells produce, food. They want to open a satellite bodega, so they maybe have their established uh, uh, storefront, but they want a satellite, kind of like a satellite office. Okay, just something offsite, smaller version to sell groceries in this underserved residential neighborhood. Maybe there's not another grocer within a mile or two. Um, maybe it's somewhere. Maybe it's a rougher neighborhood where businesses simply do not want to locate. Um, but the issue here is that it's a residential neighborhood. Okay, so generally, residential neighborhoods don't allow um, commercial activities. Arguably, selling groceries is a commercial activity. Um, Public policy tangent, many cities are and municipalities are looking at identifying so-called essential services. And this is long before COVID-19, but these essential services would essentially get exceptions from zoning requirements to be able to locate in residential neighborhoods to provide those neighborhoods with essential services, especially for pedestrians. Um, and so, but the public policy debates aside, um, generally, if we have a residential neighborhood, does the grocer need to obtain a nuisance? No, that doesn't make sense, right? A nuisance is now maybe the grocer is going to cause a nuisance or arguably causing a nuisance by having a commercial activity in a residential zone. Um, but that's not it. Easement. Does the grocer just need access to this private property? Probably not. They probably need to own the property, not just access someone else's property. What we're looking for here is C, variance. The grocer needs to obtain a variance, meaning we have this rule. This is a residential zone. We don't allow businesses in residential zones, but if this grocer can demonstrate that the way they run business, the facilities, customer base, goods sold, is not going to create a nuisance. It's not going to adversely impact the neighborhood. It would actually enhance it. Then they'll request a variance, and then it's up to that elected body to determine whether or not that variance will be granted. Okay, so that's a variance. 27. The Environmental Protection Agency, often called the EPA, seeks to restrict real estate development in Iron County to protect prairie dog habitat. Which clause of the Constitution gives them this authority? So we have the Advice and Consent Clause, the Commerce Clause, the Contract Clause, or the Santa Clause. I hope we know that the Santa Clause is probably not the answer. Okay. But we have, so the EPA, once again, is has different clauses of the Constitution. Which clause of the Constitution gives the EPA authority to regulate prairie dog habitat in Iron County? What we're getting at here is environmental protection efforts from the federal government are considered to have authority from the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, letter B. Now, there are a lot of debates whether that is actually valid. This case in particular with the Iron County Prairie Dogs, the lower level court, federal court, when that was challenged, actually said, look, this prairie dog is so localized, it does not have an impact on interstate commerce. Therefore, the Commerce Clause is moot, and the federal government has no say in regulating it. Now, it was overturned later, and the There were some other factors there, but um, keep in mind, so the when we're talking about environmental protection agency or any rules dealing with environmental protection, we're generally dealing with authority that arises out of the commerce clause of the Constitution. So most lawsuits claiming federal overreach in land use and environmental regulation will tie back to this commerce clause, claiming that that the activity um, does not have an impact on interstate commerce. Okay. um, 28. Jim and Pam are husband and wife. They buy a house together. What is the likely way they take title? And we have joint tenants with right of survivorship, tenants in common, residential tenants, married tenants. Um, if this was a more comprehensive course, we might have questions like, community tenants or tenants by the entirety, something like that. And that deals with more state law variations, um, and more than we wanted to get into. What we're focusing on here is the difference between joint tenants with right of survivorship and tenants in common. Keep in mind, joint tenants with right of survivorship, this is the default way most spouses will take title to property, especially a house they buy together. Okay. Most non spouses, whether siblings, parent, child, friends, business associates, unless they're taking in some kind of trust or business entity, they're going to take as tenants in common. So married couples will take as joint tenants with right of survivorship. Non-married couples, or rather, uh, individuals that are don't have a marital relationship, will take as tenants in common. Okay. Um, 29. A lender wants evidence of the loan on the debtor's house. Okay, so um, we have a lender giving money for property, and we want evidence that we have a loan to protect our interest, right? Because if we're giving someone money, we want to make sure that other third parties know that we gave them that money and they can't claim a superior title to the house if there's non-payment or something like that. Okay, so what kind of deed is best to provide that evidence? And we have, as our choices, we have a general warranty deed, we have a special warranty deed, we have a quit claim deed, a trust deed, or a deed of reconveyance. Keep in mind, trust deeds are evidence of a loan. Deed of reconveyance is evidence that the loan's been paid off. Okay. We have our other ones. General warranty deed is the kind of the default for a sale. Um, Keep in mind, these are much more nuanced in real life than what we're doing here for this, but for the scope of this course, keep in mind a general warranty deed is kind of the default if you're selling property. Okay. A special warranty deed is most often used for water rights or some kind of other purposes, but for this class, water rights is a special warranty deed. And then a quit claim deed is to clean up a discrepancy in title. Okay, so we don't want to use it for any other purpose. And that's just, even though they do get used a lot more than that in your brains, I want you to think this is really only something to help clean up title. This is not something that we're going to use generally. Then once again, trust deed is evidence of a loan. Deed of reconveyance is evidence that that loan's been paid off. Okay, so when a lender wants evidence of the loan, we're going to do D, a trust deed. Now 30, a farmer wants to sell his water rights. What deed is best for this purpose? In this case, that's the special warranty deed, okay? Because with water, it's subject to a lot of the state regulations. So it's recommended that we use special warranty deeds, which means there's a qualification or a limitation on that warranty, okay? Now, the rest of these, numbers 31 through 40 are, you will not be tested on these, okay? And that is because, or rather on these principles, okay? And that's just because of some of the logistical issues, some of these principles are a little harder to teach online quickly. So a lot of these principles that were taught here were more just kind of bonus ones that we were able to cover last semester because the students moved really quickly. If you want to kind of look at those, or if any of these principles really are interesting to you, you are more than welcome to read the chapters in your text regarding them. If you go to the table of contents, you can find we've got insurance calculations, um, some basic inheritance and probate type stuff, bankruptcy, intellectual property, stuff like that. So if we were teaching that in person for the latter half of the semester, we probably would have covered these, but it's just not practical to teach these online, and I didn't want to muddy the waters for you for things that were unlikely to pop up in on your CPA exam. So I hope you'll forgive me for that. Anyway, I apologize for the length. It looks like we're at about an hour for this review. Hopefully this will be helpful. Remember, so I use YouTube, so you can go back and watch this at double speed, so that you can review this maybe 2 times in an hour instead. And again, couple housekeeping rules or things. So the final is next Tuesday at 9 a.m. If you can't make that, let me know. You don't have to do it in person. Just log into Top Hat. I'll send out the code and everything. I will send out a study guide, and I will send out I'll send out the study guide first and final stuff, and then I will after that. It takes some time because I'm essentially finalizing all your grades for the semester and curving and everything. But once I put that out on Canvas and let you know that that's done, take a look at your grade as it appears in Canvas and let me know if you think there may be some kind of error, or if you're really looking for a way to make up assignments that you may have missed, or if we need to reopen something, just let me know. Okay, we can work something out. So don't despair. I know this is a kind of been a hard thing to transition to. I appreciate your patience in working with me as we've been transitioning to an online course, and miss you guys. Hope you're doing well, and let me know if there's anything else you need. We'll see you.